The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Clarence House as Tom Parker Bowles pulled his silver Range Rover through the security gates. As Camilla's eldest son, he was no stranger to the protocol and procedures that governed royal residences, but today felt different somehow. The guards seemed more alert, their eyes tracking his vehicle with unusual intensity. Tom had been visiting his mother more frequently since her marriage to King Charles, partly out of genuine affection and partly because the media scrutiny made their relationship a constant topic of public discussion. He understood the delicate balance his mother had to maintain as queen consort, and he tried to be supportive without drawing unnecessary attention to himself. The drive up to the main entrance was familiar, lined with perfectly manicured hedges and ancient oak trees that had witnessed centuries of royal comings and goings. Tom's mind wandered to the lunch appointment he had with his mother. They had planned to discuss some family matters away from the prying eyes of the press, something that had become increasingly difficult as public interest in the royal family continued to intensify. As he approached the designated parking area, Tom noticed something unusual. Instead of the typical single guard who would normally acknowledge his arrival with a respectful nod, there were 3 security personnel waiting near the entrance. Their posture was formal, almost rigid, and their expressions were unreadable behind their professional masks. Captain James Morrison, the head of personal protection for the royal household, stepped forward as Tom brought his vehicle to a stop. Morrison was a seasoned professional who had served the royal family for over 15 years, and Tom had always found him to be courteous but firm in his duties. Today, however, there was something different in the captain's demeanor that made Tom's stomach tighten with an inexplicable sense of unease. "Good morning, Mr. Parker Bowles," Morrison said as Tom stepped out of his car, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came with his position. "I hope you understand, but we need to conduct a routine security check of your vehicle today." Tom paused, his hand still on the car door handle. Security checks were not entirely uncommon, especially during periods of heightened threat levels, but the timing seemed odd. He had been visiting regularly for months without any such procedures, and his mother had mentioned nothing about increased security measures during their phone conversation the previous evening. "Of course, Captain Morrison," Tom replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing concern in his chest. "Is there any particular reason for the additional security today? Has something happened?" Morrison's expression remained neutral, but Tom caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Perhaps uncertainty, or maybe just the weight of following orders he didn't entirely understand. "Standard procedure, sir. Nothing to be concerned about. If you could please step aside, we'll make this as quick as possible." Tom moved away from his vehicle, watching as 2 additional guards approached his Range Rover. One carried a handheld device that Tom recognized as some sort of scanning equipment, while the other began a systematic visual inspection of the exterior. The precision of their movements suggested this was far from a routine check, despite Morrison's assurances. The scanning process took several minutes, during which Tom found himself growing increasingly uncomfortable. He glanced toward the main entrance of Clarence House, wondering if his mother was aware of what was happening. The windows of the building reflected the morning sunlight, making it impossible to see if anyone was watching from inside. "Mr. Parker Bowles," Morrison said, his tone becoming more formal, "we're going to need to examine the contents of your vehicle, including the trunk area. This is purely precautionary, and I appreciate your cooperation." Tom felt his heart rate increase. While he had nothing to hide, the implications of such a thorough search were troubling. As the son of the queen consort, any security incident involving him would inevitably become a matter of intense public scrutiny. The press would have a field day with such a story, and the potential damage to his mother's reputation was something that kept him awake at night. "Captain, I understand the need for security, but perhaps you could help me understand why this is necessary today specifically?" Tom asked, his voice carrying a note of firmness that surprised even him. I've been visiting regularly, and this level of scrutiny seems unusual. Morrison hesitated for a moment before responding. Sir, we've received intelligence that requires us to implement enhanced security protocols for all visitors today, regardless of their family connections or previous clearance levels. I assure you this is nothing personal, and we appreciate your understanding. The word intelligence sent a chill down Tom's spine. In the context of royal security, intelligence usually meant a credible threat of some kind. His mind raced through possibilities. Was there a specific threat against his mother? Against the king? Or was this somehow connected to him personally? One of the guards approached Morrison and whispered something in his ear. Tom watched the captain's expression change subtly, a tightening around his eyes that suggested whatever he had just learned was not routine information. Morrison nodded curtly to his subordinate before turning back to Tom. Mr. Parker Bowles, I'm going to need you to open your trunk, please, Morrison said, his voice now carrying an unmistakable edge of authority that left no room for negotiation. Tom reached into his pocket for his keys, his hands trembling slightly despite his efforts to remain calm. As he walked toward the rear of his vehicle, he tried to remember exactly what was in his trunk. There should be nothing unusual, perhaps some shopping bags from his earlier errands, maybe a spare jacket or umbrella, certainly nothing that could be considered suspicious or threatening. The electronic chirp of the car's locking system seemed unnaturally loud in the morning air as Tom pressed the button to unlock his vehicle. He moved to the rear and lifted the tailgate, stepping back to allow the guards access to inspect the contents. What happened next would forever change the relationship between Tom Parker Bowles and the royal security apparatus and set in motion a series of events that would test the bonds of family loyalty against the demands of duty and protocol. The trunk appeared empty at first glance, containing only the items Tom had expected to find. But as one of the guards began a more thorough examination, his trained eye caught something that made him freeze. Tucked into a corner, partially hidden behind the spare tire well, was a small package wrapped in dark plastic. Morrison stepped closer, his expression growing grave as he observed his subordinate's discovery. The guard carefully extracted the package, handling it with the kind of cautious precision that suggested potential danger. Tom watched in growing horror as he realized he had no idea what the package contained or how it had come to be in his vehicle. Sir, Morrison said, his voice now cold and professional. Can you explain the presence of this package in your vehicle? Tom stared at the object in the guard's hands, his mind struggling to process what was happening. The package was about the size of a hardcover book, wrapped in what appeared to be heavy-duty plastic and sealed with tape. It looked deliberately concealed, placed in a location where it would be unlikely to be discovered during casual use of the vehicle. I have absolutely no idea what that is or how it got there, Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words sounded weak and unconvincing even to his own ears, despite being the absolute truth. Morrison studied Tom's face carefully, his years of experience in security and threat assessment allowing him to read micro-expressions and behavioral cues that most people would miss. What he saw in Tom Parker Bowles' face was genuine shock and confusion, but protocol demanded that he treat this as a potential security threat regardless of his personal assessment. Mr. Parker Bowles, I'm going to need you to step further back while we examine this item, Morrison instructed, his hand moving subtly toward his radio. For your safety and ours, please move toward the building entrance and remain there until we've completed our assessment. As Tom walked toward Clarence's house on unsteady legs, he caught sight of movement in one of the upper windows. A figure had appeared behind the glass, and even from this distance, Tom could tell it was his mother. Camilla had obviously been alerted to the situation developing outside her residence, and the expression on her face, even partially obscured by the window's reflection, conveyed deep concern. The next few minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the security team examined the mysterious package. Tom watched from his position near the entrance, his mind racing through possible explanations for how such an item could have appeared in his vehicle. Had someone placed it there deliberately? Was this an attempt to implicate him in something sinister? Or was there a more innocent explanation that he simply couldn't see? Morrison's voice crackled over his radio as he communicated with other security personnel, using codes and terminology that Tom couldn't decipher. The captain's body language remained tense and alert, suggesting that whatever they had discovered was being taken very seriously indeed. From his vantage point near the building, Tom could see additional security personnel emerging from various locations around the property. The response was clearly escalating beyond a simple routine check, and the implications of that escalation were becoming increasingly frightening. The sound of approaching vehicles drew Tom's attention to the main gate, where he could see additional security cars arriving. This was no longer just a matter of checking his vehicle. It had become a full-scale security incident, and he was at the center of it all. As the gravity of the situation continued to unfold, Tom realized that whatever was in that package had the potential to change everything. His relationship with his family, his standing in the public eye, and possibly even his freedom. The careful balance he had tried to maintain as the son of the Queen Consort was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined possible. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as the security team continued their examination of the mysterious package. Tom stood near the entrance to Clarence House, his hands clenched at his sides as he watched the professionals go about their work with methodical precision. Every movement they made seemed to carry enormous weight, and he found himself analyzing their body language for any clue about what they might have discovered. Captain Morrison had called for additional equipment, and Tom watched as a van arrived containing what appeared to be specialized scanning devices. The level of precaution being taken suggested that whatever was in the package was being treated as a serious potential threat. His mind continued to race through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. The front door of Clarence House opened behind him, and Tom turned to see one of his mother's private secretaries approaching. Margaret Henley had worked for the royal household for many years and had always been professional but warm in her interactions with Tom. Today, however, her expression was carefully neutral, revealing nothing about what might be happening inside the residence. "Mr. Parker Bowles," she said quietly, "Her Majesty has asked me to inform you that she is aware of the current situation and is following developments closely. She wanted you to know that you have her full support, regardless of the circumstances." The message was clearly intended to be reassuring, but Tom found himself analyzing every word for hidden meaning. The phrase, "regardless of the circumstances," suggested that his mother was preparing for the possibility that this situation might have serious implications. The fact that she had sent a message through her secretary rather than appearing personally also indicated the gravity of what was unfolding. "Thank you, Margaret," Tom replied, his voice hoarse with tension. "Has anyone contacted my stepfather about this situation?" Margaret's hesitation before answering told Tom everything he needed to know. "The king has been informed of the security incident," she said carefully. "The proper protocols are being followed." Tom felt his stomach drop. If King Charles had been personally notified about what was happening, it meant the situation was being treated at the highest levels of royal security. The implications of that level of attention were staggering, both for him personally and for his mother's position within the royal family. From across the courtyard, Captain Morrison was approaching, his expression grave but no longer carrying the immediate tension that had characterized the previous hour. In his hands, he carried the plastic-wrapped package, now partially open to reveal its contents. Tom's heart hammered in his chest as he tried to read the captain's intentions from his posture and gait. "Mr. Parker Bowles," Morrison said as he drew near, "we've completed our initial examination of the item found in your vehicle. I need to ask you some questions, And I must advise you that this conversation may need to be recorded for security purposes." Tom nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. The formal tone of Morrison's words suggested that he was now being treated as more than just an innocent bystander in whatever was happening. "First," Morrison continued, "can you account for your movements over the past 24 hours, including when and where your vehicle was parked, and who might have had access to it?" Tom forced himself to think clearly, despite the stress clouding his mind. "Yesterday evening, I had dinner at my home in London. The car was parked in my private garage overnight. This morning, I made one stop at a shop on my way here, a florist, where I bought flowers for my mother. The car was unattended for perhaps 10 minutes while I made the purchase." Morrison made notes on a small pad as Tom spoke. "Can you provide the name and location of the florist?" "Petals and Stems on Kensington High Street," Tom replied. "I'm a regular customer there. They know me well." "Mr. Parker Bowles?" Morrison said, his tone becoming slightly less formal. The package contained documents and photographs. "At this stage, I can tell you that nothing we found poses an immediate physical threat to security. However, the nature of the materials requires further investigation." Tom felt a mixture of relief and continued anxiety. While the absence of a physical threat was encouraging, the mention of documents and photographs opened up entirely new possibilities for concern. His mind immediately went to the kinds of materials that might be considered sensitive in the context of royal security, anything from private family correspondence to potentially compromising photographs. "Can you tell me anything about what kind of documents?" Tom asked, though he suspected Morrison would not be able to provide detailed information. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specific contents at this time," Morrison replied, confirming Tom's suspicion. "However, I can tell you that we've found no evidence to suggest that you placed these materials in your vehicle deliberately. The positioning and concealment method are consistent with someone else having accessed your car without your knowledge." The relief that washed over Tom was immediate and overwhelming. While the situation was still far from resolved, the security assessment that he had not been involved in placing the materials there was a crucial development. It meant he was being viewed as a potential victim rather than a perpetrator. "Captain Morrison," Tom said, his voice stronger now, "what happens next? Am I free to see my mother, or do I need to remain available for further questioning?" Morrison considered the question carefully before responding. "For now, you're free to proceed with your planned visit, though I would ask that you remain on the property until we've completed our initial investigation. We may need to speak with you again as we develop a better understanding of how these materials came to be in your vehicle." As Morrison walked away to continue his duties, Tom realized that movement in the upper windows of Clarence House had increased. Multiple figures were now visible, suggesting that senior household staff and possibly even family members were monitoring the situation closely. The level of attention made him acutely aware that every aspect of this incident would be analyzed and discussed at the highest levels of the royal establishment. Margaret Henley reappeared at his side. "Mr. Parker Bowles, Her Majesty is ready to receive you now, if you're prepared to proceed with your visit." Tom took a deep breath and nodded. Walking into Clarence House to face his mother after such an incident felt surreal. He knew that their conversation would be unlike any they had shared before, colored by questions about security, loyalty, and the complex dynamics of royal life that had suddenly become very personal and immediate. The interior of Clarence House seemed different somehow as Tom made his way through the familiar corridors toward his mother's private sitting room. Staff members he encountered offered their usual respectful greetings, but he detected a subtle change in their demeanor. A heightened awareness that suggested word of the morning's events had spread throughout the household. As he approached the sitting room, Tom could hear voices from within, his mother's familiar tones mixed with those of at least one other person. When Margaret opened the door to announce his arrival, Tom was surprised to see that his mother was not alone. Prince William sat in one of the room's elegant chairs, his expression serious and unreadable. The presence of William added an entirely new dimension to an already complex situation. As the heir to the throne, and someone who had always maintained a somewhat reserved relationship with Camilla and her family, William's attendance at this meeting suggested that the morning's events were being viewed as having implications beyond just immediate security concerns. "Tom, darling," Camilla said, rising from her chair to embrace her son. Her voice carried the warmth and maternal concern he had always known, but he could also detect an underlying tension that reflected the gravity of what had occurred. "Your Royal Highness," Tom said, offering a formal nod to William. Despite their family connection through marriage, the protocols of royal interaction still governed their relationship, particularly in circumstances like these. William's response was measured and carefully neutral. "Tom, I understand you've had quite a morning. I wanted to be here to discuss the implications of what's happened and how we might best address the situation moving forward." The careful phrasing of William's words immediately put Tom on alert. The use of "we" suggested collective concern and responsibility, but it also implied that decisions would be made about how to handle the situation, decisions in which Tom might have limited input despite being the central figure. Camilla gestured for everyone to sit, and the conversation that followed would prove to be one of the most difficult and revealing of Tom's life. The questions came carefully but persistently about his recent activities, his associates, his financial situation, and any circumstances that might have made him a target for someone seeking to compromise the royal family. William's contribution to the discussion was particularly pointed. His questions revealed a thorough understanding of security protocols and a keen awareness of how such incidents could be used to damage the reputation of the monarchy. It became clear that he was thinking several steps ahead, considering not just the immediate implications, but also how the situation might be perceived by the media and the public if it were to become known. "The challenge we face," William said at one point, "is that regardless of Tom's innocence in this matter, the very fact that such materials were found in his vehicle creates a vulnerability that could be exploited by those who wish to harm the institution." Tom found himself in the unusual position of being discussed as both a family member and a potential security risk simultaneously. The conversation revealed the complex balancing act that royal family members constantly performed between personal relationships and institutional obligations. As the discussion continued, it became apparent that decisions had already been made about how to proceed. Enhanced security measures would be implemented for all family members, new protocols would govern access to royal properties, and there would be a comprehensive review of how such a breach could have occurred in the first place. But perhaps most significantly, Tom realized that his relationship with the royal establishment would be forever changed by the events of this morning, regardless of the ultimate resolution of the investigation into the mysterious package and its contents. The tension in the sitting room was palpable as William leaned forward in his chair, his expression growing more serious. Tom had never seen his stepbrother display such intensity, and it was becoming clear that whatever had been discovered in the package was more significant than anyone had initially revealed. "Tom," William said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who would one day be king, "I need you to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with here. The documents found in your vehicle contain sensitive information about royal security arrangements, family schedules, and private correspondence that should never have been outside official channels." Tom felt the blood drain from his face. The implications of such materials being found in his possession were staggering. Even though he had been cleared of deliberately placing them there, the mere fact that someone had used him as an unwitting courier for such sensitive information suggested a level of security breach that threatened the very foundations of royal safety. Camilla reached across to take her son's hand, her own face pale with concern. "Darling, we know you had nothing to do with this deliberately, but we need to understand how someone managed to gain access to your vehicle and use you in this way," William continued, his analysis methodical and thorough. "The positioning of the materials, the timing of your visit, and the specific nature of the documents all suggest this was a carefully orchestrated operation. Someone wanted these materials to be discovered, and they wanted the discovery to happen here, at Clarence House, during a family visit." The implications of William's assessment hit Tom like a physical blow. He wasn't just an innocent victim who had been used as an unwitting courier. He had been specifically targeted as part of a larger scheme designed to cause maximum embarrassment and damage to the royal family. The psychological impact of realizing he had been manipulated so thoroughly was almost overwhelming. "But who would do such a thing?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "And how did they get access to such sensitive materials in the first place?" William exchanged a meaningful glance with Camilla before responding. "That's what makes this situation so serious, Tom. The level of access required to obtain these documents suggests involvement from someone within the royal establishment itself. We're not dealing with an outside threat. This appears to be an internal security breach of the highest order." The revelation that they were dealing with a potential insider threat transformed the entire situation. Tom realized that his role had shifted from that of a victim to that of a key witness in what could be one of the most serious security breaches in modern royal history. The weight of that responsibility was almost crushing. Captain Morrison returned to the room at that moment, his expression even more grave than before. "Your Royal Highness," he said, addressing William with formal protocol, "we've completed our preliminary analysis. The documents include detailed floor plans of royal residences, security rotation schedules, and what appears to be intercepted private communications between family members." Tom watched as William's jaw tightened at this news. The prince's reaction confirmed what Tom had begun to suspect. This was not just a security incident, but potentially an act of espionage or sabotage that could have far-reaching consequences for the safety and privacy of the entire royal family. "Captain Morrison," William said, "I want a complete lockdown of information about this incident. Nothing leaves this room until we've had time to assess the full implications and develop an appropriate response strategy." Morrison nodded. "Already implemented, sir. The king has been briefed, and we're coordinating with relevant intelligence services to determine the source of the leak and the extent of the compromise." Tom felt increasingly overwhelmed by the scale of what was unfolding around him. What had begun as a routine family visit had evolved into a major security crisis with implications that extended far beyond his personal situation. He was now a central figure in what could become one of the most significant royal security investigations in decades. "Tom," William said, turning his attention back to his stepbrother, "I need to ask you some difficult questions, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Have you noticed anyone showing unusual interest in your activities recently? Any new acquaintances? Any approaches from journalists or researchers? Anyone asking questions about family matters?" Tom forced himself to think systematically about recent months, searching his memory for anything that might seem significant in light of current events. The process was made more difficult by the stress and shock of the morning's revelations, but he understood the critical importance of providing accurate information. "There was someone," Tom said slowly, his memory beginning to focus on an incident from several weeks earlier. "A woman approached me at a charity event last month. She said she was writing a book about the modern royal family and wanted to interview family members about their experiences. I declined, of course, but she seemed to know quite a lot about family schedules and upcoming events." William's interest sharpened immediately. "Can you describe this woman? Do you remember her name or any other details about the interaction?" Tom closed his eyes, trying to recall the conversation more clearly. She was in her 40s, I think. Well-dressed, professional manner. She said her name was Sarah Coleman and that she was a freelance journalist. She had business cards and seemed legitimate, but something about her questions made me uncomfortable. Morrison was already making notes and speaking quietly into his radio, presumably to initiate an investigation into the identity and background of the woman Tom had described. The rapid response confirmed that every detail, no matter how minor it might seem, was being treated as potentially significant. Camilla spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice filled with maternal concern, but also with the steel that had enabled her to navigate the complexities of royal life. "Tom, darling, you need to understand that your safety may now be at risk. If someone has gone to these lengths to involve you in their scheme, they may not be finished with you yet." The thought that he might be in personal danger had not fully occurred to Tom until his mother voiced it explicitly. The realization that the people behind this incident might view him as either an asset to be used again or a liability to be silenced was terrifying. William seemed to read the fear in Tom's expression. "We're going to ensure your protection, Tom, but this situation also means that your life is going to change significantly, at least until we understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." "What kind of changes?" Tom asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Enhanced security for you and your immediate family," William replied. "Restrictions on your movements until we've identified the threat. And unfortunately, increased scrutiny of all your activities and associations as we work to understand how you were targeted and ensure it doesn't happen again." Tom realized that his quiet life as the Queen Consort's son, carefully balanced between public awareness and private normalcy, was effectively over. The incident had thrust him into the center of royal security concerns in a way that would permanently alter his relationship with both his family and the institution they represented. Over the following hours, Tom found himself subjected to the most thorough investigation he had ever experienced. Intelligence officers questioned him about every aspect of his recent life, from his business dealings to his personal relationships to his daily routines. Every detail was examined for potential vulnerabilities or connections to the security breach. The investigation revealed a sophisticated operation that had been months in the planning. The mysterious Sarah Coleman was identified as a foreign intelligence operative who had been systematically gathering information about royal family members and their associates. Tom's approachability and regular visits to royal properties had made him an ideal target for their operation. Most shocking of all was the discovery that someone within the royal household had been providing the sensitive documents that were planted in Tom's vehicle. The internal investigation that followed would ultimately lead to arrests and fundamental changes in royal security protocols. William's reaction throughout the investigation was a masterclass in crisis management. He remained calm and methodical, coordinating with security services while ensuring that the family was protected and informed. His handling of the situation demonstrated the leadership qualities that would serve him well as future king, but it also revealed the enormous pressures and responsibilities that came with royal position. For Tom, the incident became a watershed moment that redefined his understanding of what it meant to be connected to the royal family. The illusion of normal life, which he had carefully maintained, was permanently shattered. But in its place came a deeper appreciation for the complexities of royal duty and the genuine care and protection that his family, particularly William, were prepared to provide when crisis struck. The investigation eventually led to the arrest of 3 individuals, including the mysterious Sarah Coleman and a staff member within the royal household who had been providing classified information to foreign operatives. The case never became public, but it resulted in comprehensive reforms to royal security that continue to protect the family to this day. Tom's relationship with William evolved significantly as a result of their shared experience during the crisis. What had begun as a formal, somewhat distant connection between step relatives became a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and understanding of the unique challenges they both faced as members of the royal family. The incident served as a stark reminder that in the modern world, even the most carefully guarded private lives could become targets for those seeking to exploit or damage the monarchy. But it also demonstrated the strength and resilience of family bonds when tested by extraordinary circumstances and the sophisticated systems in place to protect those who serve the crown. Years later, Tom would look back on that morning at Clarence House as one of the most frightening but ultimately transformative experiences of his life. It taught him that being part of the royal family meant accepting risks and responsibilities he had never fully understood. But it also showed him the depth of loyalty and protection that came with that heritage. William's calm leadership and unwavering support during those dark hours created a bond between them that would endure for the rest of their lives, built on the shared understanding of what it truly meant to serve the crown in an age of unprecedented challenges and threats.